Everyone, thanks for coming in. We got Erin Virtue, assistant coach, women's U.S. women's national team. Thanks for coming in, Erin.
Thanks for having me, guys.
So we're excited. I know you got a lot to share with us. So let's get right into it. Can you tell us a little bit about your role with the national team?
Yeah, I would love to. Um, so I have joined Karch Karai and his staff, started in 2017. And when I joined the staff, typically what happens after an Olympic Games, so after the 2016 Olympics, we have turnover not only in athletes that may retire, but also staff as well. So we had a full crop of new assistants that came through. Some of you got to meet Tama Miyashiro, it sounded like, who met with you guys. So she, myself, and Lucas Labe came in as new assistants in this quad leading up to the Olympic Games now in 2021. And so now we have 5 years instead of 4 to get ready. And so my role being brought in was, if you look at it as like a quarterback or in football, you have your offense and your defensive coordinators. I coordinate our offense and specifically work with our setters in coordinating and quarterbacking the offense is my biggest role. And I have that's one huge part of my job. When I first came into the national team, I also had worked in 12 years of college, and wow, is that long? I worked at different universities between Northwestern University, Michigan, University of Michigan, University of Cincinnati, and Loyola Chicago. So I worked at 4 different schools. And so I first came in and I was between college and the national team. And then now my other part of my job that I have is working, and I manage our high performance department. And you guys some of you probably have heard a little bit about that. But I manage some of that as well. So where I get to work a lot with our youth coaches and Henry coaches with us and others. And so I work with our youth coaches and those programs and developing them and helping kind of align all our programs together. And so that's kind of what brings me into here. I'm so lucky. I love my job. I love the people that I work with. And I'm a Midwest girl from Chicago, and now I live out in Southern California where it's beautiful all the time. So I'm getting used to that. But yeah, I'm super pumped to be here and happy to answer any questions you guys have. But that's a little bit about my role as it stands right now.
So going in, you saying you run the offense. I know Karch, when he took over the national team, he was all about playing fast. What are you guys doing to make that happen? How are you working with your setters? And why is playing with speed so important?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. And yeah, Karch is, that's one of our cornerstones of what we try to do as an offense, as a program, is to run with some speed. And I was talking to a group the other day, and running with speed, you have to have a lot of tempo and a lot of rhythm with both what your setter is doing, and also we time it out based on what step our attackers are on when our setter has the ball in her hands. And for an outside hitter, for example, we want them on their second step or rolling off of that second step when the setter has the ball in their hands. And that's in a perfect situation. And so you can imagine it's a little bit like dancing, just making sure you're on the right step when somebody else has the ball. And that one girl, you guys would probably laugh at this, but one girl asked me, is it like making a TikTok? And I said, yeah, it's kind of like making a TikTok. Though I've never made a TikTok. But for you guys, you're probably like, oh, yeah, I totally have to coordinate that. Where you have to do it. And then she's explaining this to me. I think she was 13. So you have to do the dance, but then you have to watch it and kind of continue to fine tune it. And that's what it's like when you're running an effective offense, when something is running at a certain pace where everyone's expected to be on a correct timing step. So that's something that takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of precision. But for us, we want to make sure that we run a really simple offense. So you won't see our women's national team running all sorts of combinations and all these things. We want to be really simple, but really, really effective in those simple ways. And for us, that's big. And to get to the second part of Hugo's question, it's really, really effective for us, because it really puts a ton of stress on opponent's block. Um, Opponents are going to have to make a choice when we're running fast to the pins and then fast up the middle. They have to be able to make a choice, especially when you're looking at a middle blocker. They're going to have to make a call. We're going to set faster than they're going to be able to move side to side, and we can clock those things. And so if a blocker has to make a choice, then we know if we're playing man to man and we have 4 against 3 blockers, someone's going to be open. And so we want to make sure that we're keeping that as our pass and dig moves off the net into these like medium situations. So when we get around for us, it might be 12 feet to 15 feet in this medium situation. We're definitely okay to put a little air under the ball. We're not trying to run super fast into 3 blockers and just get blocked straight down. We want to give our amazing outside hitters and right side hitters some time to go off the block and things when we get into those medium, and for sure when we get into bad situations. But when we're in good situations and definitely perfect situations, we want to stress out the block. It's something we see more and more countries doing to us. But right now we're one of the faster offenses in the world.
For sure. And I actually saw a slideshow that Karch put together, that he put together. Tom had an event at LMU, and he showed the first time implementing a fast offense. He showed them setters setting balls past the pins and hitters being completely late. How do you encourage your hitters to keep going? How do you encourage your setters to not play it safe and not slow down the offense?
Yeah, it's really important that we have a lot of buy-in there. It's in practice, just like anything, when you're trying to do something new or trying to do something that's uncomfortable, it's really important to know that we're going to make a lot of mistakes. We're going to, for sure, with our offense. And that's something I just want to keep encouraging our setters and our hitters. And it's just really, really important too, as soon as they know if they're on the right timing step or if they're putting the ball in the right speed, they know that. So we're not like 2 gears turning and always running into each other, but we finally connect. That's so big to know. I can help facilitate some of that feedback, and I try to model that for our hitters and our setters as well. So, for example, if our setter sets a really nice tempo, that's the type of ball that we want. I may look at the timing of that hitter. Maybe they're a little late, a little early, need to be on the right step, whatever it might be, depending on their position and where they're coming from. And vice versa. If the hitter is on the right step and this is the approach that we want, but that set needs to be just changed a little bit different, maybe slowed down or sped up or left inside more, all those elements, that's really good feedback for me to be able to work with those athletes on, so that we can connect in a better, more efficient way. And that's still, even in the Olympic Games, the gold medal match will probably have something that we're off on. And that's going to happen when you have such a fine chance for error. We do want to make sure that we're leaving the ball in, we're leaving the ball off the net, so that ratio of error, they're less impactful errors. We're not setting outside the pin as much or too tight to the net. So we give, even in a poor situation, we're putting up a good hittable situation for our attackers. So even if it's not perfect, we can still do something with it. And the attackers know that's a big responsibility that they have. Our setters are going to try to do everything that they can to give them a great ball. But if things are just good, or even if things are horrible, we need to try to do a good job from our attacking standpoint to make it just a little bit better.
Got it. So timing, right? At what point do the hitters, oh, let me rephrase this question. So let's say we got Jordan Larson and Kelsey Robertson. Do you have one general set for both of them, or is one able to run a different tempo? I know at our level, we kind of tend to maybe it's a cop out for us at the club level and the youth levels, that we decide to run different tempo to different hitters, but call it the same thing. Do you guys have that problem in the in the USA gym?
Sure. I would say it's like we have a recipe of sets that we're gonna have. While Jordan and Kelsey both may have a go, they both jump at different speeds and they jump at different heights and they attack in different ways. They also have different preferences if the ball's coming over their shoulder, if it's perfect on the net. And so we want to make sure, and middles for sure have that big range from where our highest leaper to our quickest off the ground, but she doesn't want the ball as high. That is a big range. Our setters and that connection and relationship to them, we're not just setting sets, we're setting people. And I think that's really important to know those variations. Now, in general, those are going to look really, really similar. But we're not trying to put our athletes into a box. I'm not coaching a robot in that situation. They're all going to have some varying different things. And so while our go will look really similar for Kim Hill, Michelle Barch, Kelsey Robinson, and Jordan Larson, it's going to, in the game and in situations as our setter starts to move, that set will look very, very, there will be variations of those sets as our setters and hitters begin to learn each other even better. So those are what you see, some of the best setters in the world. And I think one of the best, she's the national team setter for Poland. Something she does exceptionally well is she plays with Kim Hill in Italy on their pro team, and she sets her better than a lot of people in the world. And our setters study that, of how is she setting her in all these different types of situations to put Kim in a really good hittable situation. And so I think those relationships become really, really important. And that's where I think when we're repping it out in training, it's so big to get to the point where we have passers and we're setting actual people. Our setters will work in the hoops and they'll work in setter training quite a bit, but the biggest impactful training that they get is when they get a chance to set the people that they want to kill the ball.
Okay. And in some countries, the national team coach kind of gets to dictate how the youth levels run, how they train, you know, especially like a country like Brazil. Do you think that affects us? You know, do players struggle coming into the USA gym being, you know, coming from such different coaching styles and backgrounds? Does it help us or hurt us more?
It's such a good point. I think it can be both. And you know, Brazil all trains in the same gym, youth, junior, men, the beach is right outside. They're all in the same spot. And it's tremendous for them to all be aligned. We, especially in girls volleyball, somebody put it to me the other day, in women's volleyball, we have a forest of ways to train, like all these different trees. Everyone comes from a different tree of philosophy and how they want things done and trained. In men's volleyball, it's like a park with like 4 trees. You're either in this tree of philosophy or this tree. There's like 4 different ways to maybe teach the game. And so you see that aligning a lot easier. And as I work with a lot of the boys' high performance as well, I see that in the coaches that I work with. They see things a lot similarly than all the girls coaches that I work with who come from all these different philosophies. And to me, I think it can both be harmful and it can be helpful. And it just depends on the athlete, and it may even depend on the position. There may be some athletes, for example, I'll take an outside hitter or an opposite. These are 2 positions where we can see, depending on where they come from, if they have any expectation to learn how to play back row. And this is one that it's no one's fault. It's certainly not the athlete or that one coach or the sub situation. It's not one of these things, but it could be a big mix of those things. We see athletes that come and certain ones are being taught. I was a good example of this. I was taught probably 10 different ways to set, and it made me a better setter at the end of the day, because I was and definitely a better coach. I will always say that I was taught from all these really wonderful people that have the best intentions for me. But I was taught all these different ways that I was able to ask a lot of questions as I got older of what type of philosophy fit my playing style the best. Where did I feel like I was actually locating in the best way? And for sure, as a coach, it makes me so much more clear of what I believe in. And so I think there's there's a lot of really amazing things. We also have an incredible educational system that goes along with our students as their athletes and students at the same time in college. And I think that's preparing our athletes in such a different way when they come to us as well. So that I think is amazing. Would I love to align things and have some similar ways of teaching the game? No question. But I do think that we have some creative athletes that get to us that have been taught in other ways. And then they go overseas and they're taught in even more different ways. Some are just yelled at for 6 months when they're in Serbia or wherever they're at. And some are not talked to at all, the whole range of what type of feedback they get overseas. And so I think that also it makes them see the game, I hope, in various ways. So I think there can be, I don't think we're seeing a big structural difference. One place that I feel really strongly that we can be better, and I'm really passionate in helping change that. And I think my role of working on our national team and working with our youth development is to align all the things that we do under the USA Volleyball umbrella, so that when coaches are working for us at the junior level, youth level, in those national teams or in those programs, that they're being coached in a similar way. So at least a few times a year, our athletes are starting to hear and learn these systems. And there's a lot of our athletes on our national team that have come through those and at least have been at least infected with some ideas of what top level international athletes need to be thinking about at a young age. So that's, I think, a place where we can for sure improve, and I'm motivated to continue to carry that torch.
It's so funny. I'm so glad you touched on it. Setting is the one skill that is taught in more ways than any other skill. At the end of the day,
I think so too.
at the end of the day, right? If you're a hitter and you want to be good, you're taking a 4-step, and if you're a good blocker, you're probably doing a 3-step swing box, stuff like that. But setting is taught in so many different ways. If you're building your dream setter, what are some tendencies that you want them to have, right? If you could pick, hey, 3 things that I want, or just an example, fantasy setter, what would you want in that setter? Some traits.
Yeah. So a really big one that our setter is actually, one of them is, she's living in Colorado right now. And so she's able to start training in the gym. And so she asked me what she should start working on. Day one, back in the gym, she's like a child because she hasn't sat in a little while. And so she's trying to get better at something while she gets her feet under her. So the thing that I told her, and something that I think is a baseline of where our setters need to be really good, and young setters as well, is being really, really disciplined when the passer or the digger is touching the ball. And so what I mean by that is, let's just take in serve receive, because it's something so controllable. So when we're entering from serve receive, wherever we are, rotation 1 or 4, wherever, or even just I'm standing at the net or near the net, ready to receive, as soon as we know that that ball isn't going to hit the net and dribble over, that obviously we can help with that ball. But as soon as we know that, we need to make sure we're getting eyes and facing our passer, and we're stopped and balanced. There's 2 places I want our setters to be as balanced as they can be. One, right when the first contact happens. This is going to allow us to get an awesome first step and get to the ball and be as efficient as we can. And there's so many ways to move from A to B that are being taught, but I'm just talking about this is something we can all do no matter what you're teaching. And number 2 time we want to be balanced is, as often as possible, can we be balanced in a spot when we're actually setting the ball? So whether that's off 2 feet, 1 foot, my left foot, my right foot, I'm jumping, I'm on the ground. Can I be balanced before the first contact and when you're making the second contact? So be super balanced in those 2 spots. It's going to help us already increase where I'm at. And to be balanced in that second place when you're touching the ball, it's going to involve so much efficient footwork, getting a great read on the ball, all these elements that we're going to work really hard and teach. So, but those 2 elements are going to be huge. And then the third, I would say, is when I'm actually touching the ball. So we talk about that in passing a lot, of what's happening when the ball's actually touching my platform. The same with setting. What's actually happening when I'm actually making contact with the set and as I finish through? Can that be as consistent as possible? And one thing, as I watch now, I recruit a lot of college setters and I see who's going to maybe come to our gym. I watched probably 400 of the video tryouts that just went out for high performance. And as I'm watching a lot of the youth, the thing I'm seeing too is there's all these different ways to maneuver the hands on the set. What I love to see is when someone takes the ball at a really consistent point and finishes in a really consistent point. So that I have, of course, ways that I'm going to teach that, and we can dive into that. But I think if we're doing that really consistently, we're going to get a better product. So those three elements, I think, are ones that as coaches and as athletes, and we need to try to be as efficient as we can be and be balanced on that before the first contact. Get to the ball, however you get there. And again, I have plenty of ways our setters want to get there. It can be balanced when you're setting and then how you're consistently finishing.
So to sum it up, right, we want to the lead setter traits: reads the pass well, gets to the ball efficiently, and then finishes to her target, right?
Yep.
So yeah, I like that a lot. Real simple, and there's different ways you can go about it, but it's a good start, I think, for some of our athletes to, where they should spend their time.
Yeah, for sure.
What are your tips to managing a game?
As a coach or a player?
I think both. And here's why I ask, because I've heard some coaches say set the long way. So then now it's like, sure, they're making that long set, but now they're really predictable when the passes, they're going to go long way.
I see.
Yeah. So what are your tips?
So just like as a running an offense standpoint.
Yeah, I want to hear both coaches and perspective.
Yep. So there's all different ways to kind of manage an offense. And I absolutely look at it with our setters as we're working together to come up with both game plans. And as the match goes along, when are we ready to adjust out of that and things like that? We are absolutely going to make a plan based on how our blocking system is against us. So in that specific example with, are we going to set long or are we going to set short? That may depend on is that middle blocker following my pass or are they staying in the middle of the net and reading? If they're staying in the middle of the net and reading, I'm going to run short on them all day. If they're following my pass, then I'm going to make them follow that pass and go long. And so what we're going to do is we're going to come up with an initial game plan. And of course, we know that the defense of the opponent, they're going to come up with their game plan. And so we are going to come up with the best plan we can based on the systems we know that these teams may run, all the while knowing that they may adjust out of that. And so right when we get into the match, both myself on the bench, the setter on the court, and the setter that's off, we usually bring two setters to every tournament. Mm-hmm. So the three of us are all looking at different things. In some cases, myself and the setter on the bench are going to see things that the blocking adjustments might happen way clearer than the person on the court. Her job is to execute the game plan as it's known. And then our job is to make sure that's still a good game plan, or do we need to alter our course? Maybe they decided to now move with the pass and we need to go long in that same scenario. So we also don't want to chase one play. If there's one adjustment that they made for one play, once there begins to be a theme, maybe 2 or 3 times something happens, then we'll probably take ourselves out of that game plan and look towards shifting it. So some of that is just trying to stay ahead of what, like, let me give a really clear example. Russia is a team that likes to, they make a really early move with their blockers. So we call that a scheme, or some people call it a commit block. So if we have 2 hitters in the front row and let's say 2 in the back row, they may say, okay, between these 2 hitters in the front row, we're going to go only with the slide. And we're going to go with them on the slide, and we're going to leave Kelsey Robinson by herself on the outside. So they may start to change that. So what we'll look for is all sorts of patterns to see. They're always going to go with Faluka, but then with when Tori's hitting a slide, they're going to stay and read. So we'll study these things. And then during the match, that's when I'm checking and I'm making sure, okay, this is what I planned for. And then now we need to shift because they're shifting their strategy against us. And that's going to happen all match long. So, so that's a little bit of how we're going to manage it. The team of the three of us are going to talk through a lot of that. Of course, our hitters and people on the court and our other staff, they're going to be seeing those things as well. But those are going to be some elements of how we kind of see the game going through. Yeah. So hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah. And as far as feedback, you touched on a little bit throughout our interview so far, but it seems like that feedback loop is so important. I agree 100%. I've actually been in the USA gym and it's awesome to see because you guys let the players have those conversations and you guys are there to facilitate if you need to, but for the most part, you're letting them go and learn that way. How hard is it for a setter? Because it kind of seems like their feedback loop can go to two different types, right? Based off of a pass and based off of a hitter versus totally. A hitter only seeing, everyone else, every other position is only coming one way. And I know for us, some of our setters are very nervous to tell their hitters that they're late or ask for feedback. What's your advice?
Yeah. No, I think I tell our hitters and our setters as soon as that feedback loop can close and take me out of it, the better. But I'm a really important part of that. And I know that, or any coaches early on in that process, especially when we're dancing and we're not sure. When we're not sure, a coach has to help clarify that. And video can help clarify that. We run our video playback as well. If a hitter knows they should be a middle, let's say on a slide approach, we want on their third step, so they can go and watch that. And so that video loop helps. It helps me as a coach too. I'm not going to see, if I'm watching 4 hitters on every play, I can only see one timing of one hitter on any given play. So it helps me. Now I've gotten the habit of carrying the video playback with me in practice, but we have it on a TV there as well. But that helps me also. If Molly's running a slide, but Jordan Larson's on the go, then I am only maybe seeing Molly's steps, but I don't see Jordan. So that video feedback helps. It's also really important for me to model what that communication might look like to a setter or from a setter to a hitter. And so that's something I've learned that's really helpful. So if let's say a set was too high to a slide and a middle was on the best step that they could be, they're on the third step, they're in the right spacing. So I may say, hey, Carlini, let's speed that up. Molly was on the best step there. So Molly, you stay. Lauren, let's set a little faster. And so then it's not confusing. One person knows that they're going to try to remain and doing what they're doing, and one knows how to adjust and what they're going to adjust to do. So those type of feedback, I think, guys, is really important. I think taking any of the personal element out of that, or any of the tone. As I said, I had plenty of people. I'll just digress and tell one story. When I was setting with the national team, I was a rookie. Like I was like shaking in my boots every day when I was practicing. And this is back like 100 years ago when Jenny Longping was our coach. And I set a gap too low to one of our middles, a 31 set or a shoot set. And she just caught it. So we're in hitting lines, right? She tosses to me. I set her this gap. She caught it, didn't try to tip it over or anything, caught it and threw it at my feet, or like power tipped it back to me and just said a higher with some attitude and maybe some other language. And so I was like panicking. Like I was like, okay, that's not gonna, I didn't even think like insulted. I was just so mad that I set it too low. And so how it went was I set all the middles, and then the next setter got in line and she set all the middles. Well, the next setter happened to be Robin Amo, who's like my idol and like a badass. Sorry if that bothered that language, sorry. But she was a rock star. And so she gets up, and that same middle gets up and tosses her a ball. And Robin caught it and just tossed it aside and said, next. Just to have my back. It was amazing. And I don't encourage that, but I think it's an awesome example of like, don't talk to your setter that way. So there's
Yeah.
a really good way to give some feedback. And this one middle who shall not be named, and she's an incredible person. We're friends now, but we weren't friends at the time. But she certainly didn't have a great way of, especially knowing how like scared and nervous I was, and just trying to be good for whoever wanted me to be good. Um, so it was an awesome way a teammate had my back, and one that needed a little work on her feedback. So I think it's a great chance for coaches to model that. I don't think our coach was really cared much about that at that time. So she didn't say anything.
To be fair though, right? Middles get a little bit of leash because they do a lot of work without getting set, right?
This is true. This is true. Yeah, and another thing I think is really big for the middles is that even when we're not set, especially on the quicks, slides, we're not always jumping every time when the ball's in the hands. But if you don't get set, but I think on the quicks, it's always really good to, even in the times you're taking a jump, to be able to assess were you still on the right timing step and what was happening in front of you. If you had a middle right in front of you, well, maybe we ran the best choice possible. If there was a middle and maybe a help blocker right in front of you. Now, if you have an open net all the time and you're putting the ball away and we should set you more, then that's a good conversation to have. I get that question a lot too, sometimes from our hitters in a really good way. I think a lot of them handle that in an awesome way. They want to be set more. They want to do more for the team, which is great. I encourage those conversations to come. And a lot of times what I tell them is like, if you're getting it done, we're going to set you more. That's going to come your way. And also knowing for our offensive tackers to know our strategy going into the game is really important, because there was a match. Fluka is one of our all-time greats for USA, one of our middles. And there was a match where, in one of those matches where they left early to go block with someone, they were doing that. And she was getting pissed because we weren't setting her. And I said, how many blockers do you have every time you run something? And she said 2. And it doesn't mean she couldn't score. She could definitely score with 2 people, but that left 2 hitters over here with 1 and no one.
Yeah.
And we were winning the match with that strategy. And so I think it's important to also know what's going on around you, and how is that going to help. And if you can be successful, or you're doing your job by not being set, you're drawing these 2 blockers over here.
And then I got a couple more questions for me, and then we'll open up to Q&A.
Cool.
But Erin, by the way, I love the detail in your answers. Like, I'm putting you all on the fly, and your answer.
Oh yeah, you'll have to stop me. I just like to talk, so at some point you'll probably have to stop me.
How important is the slide in women's volleyball? Why is it such an important and effective set?
Yeah, it's I think it's important because it's really efficient, and we have so much data to back that. I think what is difficult about it as a defensive team is it's hard to read as a blocker based on the approach. You're not like, if you've ever played basketball, you take a charge, so you have to like line someone up, and you're taking a charge and they're running right at you. Well, slide, because of the nature of the way that approach is coming, it's harder to know where to take the charge and where to line up. So what we often see on the offensive side is blockers are not lining up very well against this slide. I think we do a really good job of this, and it's dependent, and Luca teaches it really well on how to block and defend it. But it's also a very fast set. So it's one that against our outsides is very hard, unless you're sending a second person over there. It's somewhere where we often have a one-on-one situation. So outside hitters, same as like a red, just a back set. That's a very fast set, but the slide is even faster. And so a red might be a second step tempo, and a slide is a third step tempo. So it's just a step faster. And so I think there's a lot of different reasons why it's hard to defend, but the reasons why we continue to run it is it just remains efficient.
Yeah.
And there are different athletes. It's of course something that can be learned and trained. That's another one where we have middles come to our gym that maybe are more comfortable in front or more comfortable behind the setter off 1 foot or off 2 feet. And our middles are asked to be good in both situations, because we want to run them in various situations to challenge the block in various ways. And sometimes when our setters front row, we'll keep them in front because we have a really nice opposite hitting out of the back row. And so we'll constantly be changing that up. A really good example of the slide being really effective is Ju Ting is a China outside hitter, probably one of the best players in the world. Number 2 for China, if you're ever watching them play. And she is probably the best left side blocker in the entire world, statistically, but also just how formidable she is there. And the the difference in how she blocks the slide and how she blocks just a 2-foot attack right at her, it's just different enough where she gets her timing is just off on that, and her range of where she can go and get over is not as much there. Now, don't tell her I said that, because that's what we'll run at her and we'll score, but she's still very good at it and probably one of the best slide blockers. Her and Michelle Barch, I would say, are probably 2 of the better ones out there. But it's a tough one to block, and one that we train a ton because we run it a lot in our gym, and so our left side blockers get really good at it. China even has one of the better slide hitters in their gym. It's also an attack that it can be attacked at a bunch of different points and look really similar. So there can be, even in our slide, like I said, we like to miss things inside. The slide will probably put about 1 foot inside, so it's pretty close to the antenna. But even in that space, we're going to miss a little bit here and there, and the attacker can kind of pick that off, especially a really excellent slide hitter like Faluka and others that we have, where they can jump early and be able to take that cross or wait for the ball to be able to go line. So you see it with a lot of range from the best ones.
Yeah. And then my last question for me, and we'll open up to Q&A. So as far as the importance of change, kind of 2 parts to the question. What do you think is the most underdeveloped skill for players coming into the USA gym? And what schools do you see players just thrive once they get to your gym? Or is it more dependent on if they're really good, they're going to be really good there?
Gosh, that's a good question. I think it's not for lack of trying, but I think the skill that we see the most ground to be gained from the college game into the national team game has to be serve receive, passing. And we have an awesome passing coach, Tama, and I think that's just because I think there's plenty of athletes that are passing. There are also a lot that are not getting those chances, of really good outside hitters that are not getting those chances and maybe subbed back row out, and that's a big bummer to anyone that wants to play internationally. It's a really hard thing for them to recover from if they're not seeing those examples of that. And some of the reason it's a tough thing to emulate is the level of serving just gets so much more aggressive and powerful at the international level and the national team level. And so what we're seeing there too, and the athletes that come to our gym, they find out very quickly how important serving is, and to be able to knock someone out of system is a really big deal in our gym, but also anyone we compete against. And teams know the best way to beat USA is to get them out of system. We have the best in-system offense in the world, and for us to be, when we get out of system, that's where anyone is going to struggle more. And we lost 1 match in the World Cup this past year, and China beat us. And I really think it was the best thing that they did was serve in that game. And we have amazing passers and some of the best in the world at passing. And we statistically are one of the best teams in the world at passing right now. And that is something that, for sure, when that breaks down, it's really hard for us to run really efficiently. As we said, when we get off the net, things slow down and blockers are a little bit better. What school is going to, I don't know if I have an answer to that. I see that happen in I mean, you can look at the representation of our athletes. They come from all over. They come from different styles of play, different types of coaches, different areas of the country. Um, we have we have athletes from different conferences. So we have what I think is a really nice test for a lot of our athletes is there's a lot of them that are playing in really competitive leagues. Um, here when they're in, whether it's the Pac-12, the SEC, the Big Ten, whatever it might be, they're playing in really competitive leagues where they're getting a lot of challenge at them. They're not It's not an easy match for them every night. It's like the more they're challenged, the more they're ready to prepare to be challenged at the next level. So we see that all over the place. So I don't know that I could point to any one thing. Um, we have one athlete as our one of our youngest athletes, Jordan Thompson, just came from the University of Cincinnati and just finished there. And she, even there, her team was they were put in such tough situations, which was awesome. And Jordan played a huge role for her team, so she was ready when she came to the national team to be able to have a lot on her shoulders and get a lot of reps and examples of things, hitting in the front row, hitting in the back row. You don't see a lot of opposites. She's an exception that get a chance to play a lot in the back row and be a really good weapon for their team out of the back row. In women's volleyball, that's starting to develop more, where we can see more and more girls hitting from the back row. It's such a good option for us as an attackers, something our team is getting better at, but not everyone on our team was comfortable in that. That was something that when I came in, for sure wanted to push more of in this quad. And so that's another element that for Jordan Thompson was really great, that her coach gave her that opportunity to play in the back row and be an option for them back row. Someone like Annie Drews, one of our other opposites, wasn't as much of a back row player, so she had some ground to gain there. She's doing an incredible job, and she had some ground to gain. She came from a program that wasn't always an option for her to play in that position, and maybe she hadn't earned it yet either at that time. But those are two examples of two of our top players. We have a lot of them, a lot of examples I could probably give of where they maybe what they needed to work on when they got to our gym. So I think it's all about what type of experience are you going to get. Are you going to get a really good chance to be pushed? If someone were to tell me, no one told me this, I wasn't that good, but that you're going to start right away, I would hate that, because I would say, well, how are you training the people above me? Like, why aren't they starting? You've been training them. They should be better than me. I would want to be able to earn my spot and not be given to me, because that wasn't going to make me better. So I would encourage anyone who's having those types of conversations to want to go into a place where you're going to get challenged, because I think if you're challenged in a little cycle, you're going to get spit out in a way better place than when you entered.
All right, thank you, Erin. I'm
Yeah.
gonna open up. We got our first question from Amelie.
Awesome.
So Amelie, I'm gonna unmute you, or Coach Trent's gonna unmute you so you can ask your question.
Oh yeah, I was just wondering, so during one of my tournaments, my coach told me to set the same girl on my team consistently. And what ended up happening was the blockers ended up reading me very easily and automatically knew to go to the outside. And as I was rewatching old film, even the outside on the opposing team ended up starting really close inside. So I was just wondering, should I stick with what my coach says, or should I start saying other people to avoid a 1-3?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I love the way you asked that. I think having a conversation with your coach in that situation is big, to see, okay, maybe they're seeing something different. Like I said, there's times where I'm playing in a match, or I'm coaching in a match, and the setter on the court or the setter off, we're all three of us seeing some different things that are happening. And so your coach may have seen something different, or they maybe weren't seeing exactly what you're seeing or feeling out on the court. So having that conversation, I think, in a really good and respectful way is important. And we should be asking questions. I hope my athletes ask me questions. You know, there's always a good way to manage that and ask those. Um, and maybe there's a strategy that that coach knew that you hadn't thought of either. Um, and so I think for sure ask the question. I think also it's when there is a specific, let's say I don't call plays for my setters very often. We have strategy that we want to implement, but the pass and the situation is always going to determine what actual choice that they make. Um, but Lauren Carlini was in a place this past year. She set for a team in Moscow, Russia, her her pro team, and their coach had a really similar approach that you are describing. He wanted her to set. She had a really good opposite on her team, and they just kept saying set Goncharova the whole time. That's her name, Goncharova. So they only wanted her to set the opposite. And so what I encouraged Lauren, and I'm thousands of miles away, was it's really really tough when you know and everyone else knows who you're going to set to be as neutral as you can be and not look like you're going to make that choice that everyone knows you're going to make. So that was all Lauren could control in that situation. It was her job. She was getting paid at this point. Her contract is to do what this coach wants to do and try to win his way. She didn't like that. It was really challenging for her. Not that that situation is the exact same way. You should ask those questions. You speak the same language as your coaches, so you should talk to them. But for Lauren, the challenge there was, can you still approach technically? And even though you don't agree tactically what you're being asked to do, but can you approach it technically really sound and really efficiently that they have to second guess, even though they know you're going to set the opposite, they have to think about it. And that's your job as a setter, is can you still make that middle blocker guess what you're trying to do? And not that you're trying to be all deceptive or anything. I'm not about that. But can you be as neutral as you can be and be really disciplined in how you're training and how you're executing that skill?
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Yeah. You're welcome.
We're going to go to Lindsay.
Hi. Myself after, just because it's really loud in my house, but what are some things that a team can do to build and develop connections faster?
Lindsay, are you talking about like personal or like hitter setter?
Hitter setter or passer setter, like all of those.
Okay. I think talking to each other, actually I know talking to each other is the fastest way to get that. Like I was talking about before, Hugo had asked about kind of a feedback loop. Even when things are great, you guys don't forget to tell people that they're great. Sometimes we think feedback needs to happen only when it's like something's wrong or something's off or we get aced. Now let's talk about this seam, or I set 3 feet over you. I know I set 3 feet over you, so you don't have to tell me all the time. But when things are amazing, even at our level, I tell our hitters and our setters need to tell the passers, like, that was an amazing pass. Like, I love that you put me moving forward and it was high and it was really easy for me to get there. I tell our hitters all the time, like when they get a kill and it's amazing, even when they don't get a kill, or they just get a nice swing that it connected. If that's the ball that they want, let's let the setters catalog that in their card catalog. You guys probably don't even know what a card catalog is. I barely know what that is, but let's let them get in the file cabinet. Okay, you probably know there. Let's get that in the file cabinet of, like, I'm going to store this away, that this is the ball that I need to set cars to low every time. And that's so important, that those really good things, they're even more impactful to me than any of the mistakes that we're making. So to develop those connections, I think we just have to talk about them. Watching it for sure helps. Watching some film, knowing what you're trying to achieve is a big one. But the communication between the people that are trying to make the connection is the fastest way to make that happen.
All right, I think Lisa has a question.
Hi, Erin. How are you?
Good. Hi.
Good. Good to see you. I know the Junior Olympics got canceled for us, so I am just curious. Like, what are you guys going to do moving forward? Are you guys going to have the same team? Are you guys going to have to run tryouts again? And are people planning on coming back? Because I know, sometimes people train years for this one opportunity to go to the Olympics, and I would imagine it's probably similar as far as volleyball goes too. Like, what is the feeling like? Have you guys thought about it? Because this is really pretty unprecedented as far as
Totally.
things go.
Yeah. So when the Olympics were postponed, it was like someone punched us in the stomach. Just like how you guys last Wednesday or when you heard the news, you probably felt that way. I for sure felt that way on Thursday when I had to make the call to cancel all the high performance programs. So you feel like you just get like punched, and maybe even in the face, like it hurts. And for us, the Olympics was the same. The really thing that we're really grateful for is there was a postponement, and they're right now scheduled for 1 year later, next July. And so the kind of the evolution of how our team is always carry quite a large team. Right now we would have 24 athletes. Last year we had 53 athletes that kind of walked through our gym. So we train a large group. And then to the Olympics, we select 12, and 12 will go. And of that 24 that began this pandemic with us, or that we started to kind of collect, all those girls are in to try to train and compete and be ready for next year. Now things could change. We have amazing women on our team. We have a mother, we have wives, we have ones that are getting married. What happens kind of a lot of times after an Olympics is it's a natural place to retire. It's a natural place to maybe have the next phase of their lives. And so there's a lot of personal journeys that are being thrown into that. It's not just about now we have 1 more year to wait to train. And so each of our athletes are definitely going through that, not on their own, but their individual journeys that they're going through of what makes sense for them. And it's not easy. It's, we're like you guys, obviously just still in Southern California, not able to do anything in the gym, and might start doing a little bit of that hopefully soon. But right now I'm hopeful that we have our crew that will still continue to train for next year. They have contracts now that they'll go. A lot of the pro teams sometimes they would report in September or October for their pro seasons. We have some that are being asked to come as early as July 1st. I think that's the earliest that I've heard. And so there's some that may start to leave for their pro seasons early. So we may not even collect as a full team. I'd be shocked if actually we did this year. But there's certainly really, really hard days for our athletes too, as I'm sure you guys have gone through those. But I know that the days, like when we found out about the Olympics, there was a lot of sadness, but there was also a lot of hope, because there wasn't something that was just canceled. It was, we still have a chance to go and compete in Tokyo next year.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Just kidding.
Well, you get 1 more year. You know what I'm saying?
Just kidding. There are plenty though that there's some girls, maybe there was an injury or something had happened where now they have more time to get healthy. Yeah. So there's some blessing in that too.
Silver lining.
Yep.
All right. If anybody else has a question, go ahead, type it in, let me know. And then while we wait, Erin, how do you deal with injuries? I know a lot of these players that come and play overseas, they're asked a lot. They're asked a lot physically on their bodies. How do you maybe they're banged up, but they're trying to make this roster. Who's more vocal about it? Or how does an athlete ask their coach that I'm hurting?
Yeah, it's a really good point, and it's one that it's really, really important for our athletes to be really open about how their body is feeling. What we see quite often is athletes come back to our season, our USA season, in all sorts of different ways. Some are feeling really good off their pro season. A lot of them their bodies are run down. They're coming off of the last thing that happens in the pro seasons are their playoffs. And our women are on some of the best teams in the world, sometimes playing in 2 leagues at one time. And so they're coming in where they're playing a lot. They're not necessarily getting rotated out like we do with our team quite a bit, so we don't run anyone into the ground. So what we try to do is give them a little bit of a break and give them a chance to just work on some lifting and then come back to practice. And that doesn't always work for every single person. We often have a tournament that begins weeks after they return. And so what we try to do is really manage the jumps that are happening, manage the load that we're putting on our athletes. Karch is incredible at making sure we have as efficient practices as possible so that we're not doing any extra overloading of our jumping or athletes like that. It's really, really important the older you get, and even young athletes like yourselves, to make sure you're recovering and taking care of your bodies in all the ways that's really important. And we have, some may not learn that until they're 28, and then they're like, I wish I would have done this 10 years ago. But those are really important aspects of how to recover, how to sleep, how to make sure that you're getting the treatment on your body if you're feeling any kind of ailment, or if you have any kind of preventative strength training that you're starting to do so that injuries become less common. There are some that are going to happen, and how you manage those are really big. We have an incredible staff around us, so the support can come from me, but also I'm just there as an encourager and a pat on the back, like, you got this, and making sure that they're doing what they need to do when I know that that athlete might be restricted. But our strength and athletic training staff is awesome, and mental performance, as we know, injury can come with a lot of things that are really, really hard on the mind. And so that's really important to think through as well.
And last question will be Hannah.
Okay, sorry. Hi, Erin. Thanks for doing this for us. My question is, well, it's a two-parter. So the first one is, what are some key qualities you look for in athletes? So I know you talked about, what your, Hall of Fame setter looks like, but just in general for athletes, are you one to look for height, or are you just looking for speed? Just what are some things just to give our athletes an idea? And then I like to ask this question a lot, but, just looking around, going scouting, and then you see different athletes. Have you ever seen an athlete that can be really good physically, and she's, she really turns your eyes and, ooh, I might want to watch her, but then you just see her act a way where you just shake your head a little bit, whether it's you see that she might be a bad teammate, or not a bad teammate, but you just see a little bit of attitude. And then if you do, then what's your thought process? Is it something that you just turn away from, or is it something that you think, oh, maybe I'll try to work with her? But I mean, I've heard different answers from different coaches, so I'm just curious to see what your thought process is.
Yeah, great questions, Hannah. The first thing, what stands out in athletes, and I would start by answering this question with just even looking at the profile of our team. But if I looked at the profile of our team, if I looked at the profile of all the teams in the Olympic Games, and I just looked at, let's say, middle blockers, I'm going to see different heights, different body compositions, different speeds, different jumps. One of our best players, guys, she only touches maybe 9-10, an outside hitter. She's one of the best in the world. One of our others is way higher, and they're just getting it done in all different shapes and forms. If I was trying to paint a perfect one, they just look all different ways. So the thing that stands out to me as a consistent thing to look for is how hungry is that person to get better? Because if they, and that's not as measurable as I'd like it to be. I would love to have a ruler and be able to hold it up to somebody and say, okay, this person is this much wanting to get better. But to me, when I look at the athletes in our gym, where they've come from, some of them have come from top programs, top teams, 4-time All-American, and they've had this perfect picture, and others have not. And so it looks all these different ways, but the consistent trait they have is they're trying to sharpen that sword in one way or another. And I see that, and I've had years of where I've been the recruiter on the other side watching for that, and I like to go and talk to coaches. I've talked to a lot of those that are coaching here, and I've been in practices, and you can see these things. You can see athletes that are grinding it out and just want to get better, and those are the ones to me that are going to get better because they want it that bad. And so I can see that. So that's huge, and I can't stress that enough. And that's in coaches too. I feel like I want to live that as a coach every single day. I'm trying to get better all the time. I'm doing all sorts of research on all sorts of things. The second part of that is with the attitude. It's really important that we understand that these things can be learned and gotten better at. There was a point in my career, I think, when I was first recruiting that I would probably have walked away way faster from that type of athlete. It's not okay to bring that to really highly successful teams. They may have some of those characters involved, but that's not the type of culture we want to build at the national team under this leadership that we have. There are athletes that probably would want to be in our gym that aren't welcome in our gym if they have those types of attitudes that you described. But I will say that those things can be worked on and learned just like any other skill. So if we find an athlete, especially the younger they are, when they're just learning how to be themselves, how to figure out who they are, how to be a good teammate, how to be unselfish, whatever the characteristics might be. As coaches, as recruiters, the older I got and the longer I recruited, I wanted to know what I was getting so that if I recruited them in, and I had a big mix of that, but I had to do that with open eyes of what did that athlete have to work on, just like someone had to work on their passing. And if there's anyone on the call that's like, yo, that might be me, I might be that one that's like got to work on my attitude, that's something that, like, again, to come to this level, non-negotiable, we got to get there. But at your level right now, know that there's time and you can work on it, and hopefully you have people around you that are going to push you to be better in those ways, because there are people who will just walk by. That was for sure me early, and a lot of recruiters that I know and talk about that's some non-negotiables for them too, of what kind of culture they want to bring in for their universities. And people that I worked for too, that was just not always going to be the case. And so I think I think it's just something we can get better at, and we should try to get better at, to be part of a team. If we were just start throwing shot put, you can have whatever attitude you want, I guess. But in volleyball, we got to be able to buy in.
All right, Erin, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for the insight. Is there anything you want to leave us with? Go for it. The floor is...
No, you know what? I'm just really grateful to be in here. I'm going to put my email on this little chat so you guys can email me if you ever have any questions about anything, or need anything, or, when we start practicing, next year, let's just say, when we have team going on, you guys can come and watch practice. You're not that far away. Well, depending on where you are and what kind of traffic, I guess, there is. But, you guys are always welcome if you're coming down to the ASC for any other reason anyway. Would love to see you guys.
All right, everybody, thanks for coming in. And thank you again, Erin.
Thank you guys. Have
Thank
a good
you.
night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day.